Hyuga este un termen specific danez. El nu are o traducere exactă în limba română pentru că e un cuvânt propriu culturilor. Dar s-ar putea totuși traduce prin sintagma fericirea este un lucru mărunt.
Cel care a scris această carte, Mike Wiking, este chiar fondatorul Institutului de Cercetare a Fericirii din Danemarca. Această carte putem să spunem că este un ghid pentru a înțelege de ce danezii sunt atât de fericiți, sunt cei mai fericiți oameni din lume.
Dar totodată putem descoperi cum să facem să fim și noi mai fericiți. Deși sunt multe reguli pe care le aplicăm fără să le conștientizăm, această carte ne arată exact ce presupune fiecare lucru și cum ne schimbă viețile. Dar mai avem o surpriză pentru voi.
Încă o surpriză?
Bineînțeles, pentru că Happy Channel nu putea să rateze întâlnirea cu însuși guru al fericirii, Mike Wiking.
Nu pot să cred! A acceptat să ne dea un interviu?
Bineînțeles, l-am prins pe Mike în timp ce își lansa cartea la editura Litera și bineînțeles că n-am putut să ratăm ocazia de a-i lua un interviu și de a afla povestea. Iar cum arată și ce o să ne povestească el o să vedeți în câteva minute, pentru că asta e surpriza noastră pentru voi, doamnelor. Iar surpriza nu se oprește doar aici. Dacă intrați și pe pagina noastră de Facebook și răspundeți corect la o întrebare, puteți intra în posesia acestei cărți.
Mike Wiking, and it's really a pleasure to have you because we are Happy Channel. I mean, this is incredible, and you are writing about happiness. You are the founder, the CEO of the Happiness Research Institute in Denmark. First of all, before asking you what is Hyuga, because actually I don't think there are many Romanians who know that. I want to ask you, how did you come to do that? How did you come to dedicate your life to the research of everyday happiness, let's say?
I think I was just curious to solve some of the questions we're trying to look at the Happiness Research Institute. So I started it 5 years ago, back in 2013, and the year before I was working at another think tank looking at the sort of sustainable economy. But I noticed how much was happening globally with happiness research, happiness measurements. You had UN, they passed the happiness resolution in 2012, and they started to publish the World Happiness Report. And I was just wondering, why is it that Denmark always do well in these happiness rankings? There should be somebody trying to explore that and figure that out. And then I thought, maybe I should do that. So I set up the institute, and we work basically with 3 questions at the institute, and my career is also dedicated to those 3 questions. We try to figure out how can we measure happiness. Secondly, why are some people happier than others? And ultimately, we want to discover how can we improve quality of life. So all our projects are trying to shed some light on those 3 questions.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you. How can you measure happiness? Because there's so many indicators. I mean, only that I can think. How do you do it exactly? Maybe, I don't know, there's some important factors?
Yeah, so we break happiness down into different dimensions because, as you say, there are different perspectives of happiness, what happiness is. So happiness can be sort of the pursuit of pleasure on a daily basis, sort of instant gratification, the hedonistic life, which the ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus thought of. But happiness can also be what Aristotle thought of as the good life, and to him the good life was the meaningful life. So do people have a sense of purpose? So we try to break it down and look at different components, and it is a wide concept. It does involve different things. We ask people directly how they feel about their lives, how happy they are here and now, but also how happy they are with their life overall. And then ideally what we do is we follow people over time, so we could follow 10,000 of your viewers over the next decade and then see how changes in their life circumstances impact their life satisfaction and their happiness. You know, moving to Bucharest, moving from Bucharest, you know, having children, getting married, maybe some people get promotions, maybe some people get fired, and then see how does those events impact different dimensions of happiness.
And now it came the time to ask you, what is Hyuga?
Hygge is a Danish concept, and Hygge has been called the art of creating a nice atmosphere, but it's these situations where we experience sort of safety, togetherness, warmth, relaxation, savoring simple pleasures. One of my favorite sort of Hygge moments was in Sweden, where we were a group of friends in a cabin, and we had been out hiking in the day and came back to the cabin, and we lit a fire in the fireplace. And we also had a stew boiling on the stove, and those were sort of the sounds you could hear because we were all just relaxing and being tired. And then one of my friends said, could this be any more hyggelig? And then another friend said, yes, if there was a storm outside, because Hygge is also this feeling of being sheltered from the outside. Yeah. So that's what Hygge is, and Hygge happens everywhere. Denmark doesn't have a monopoly on Hygge. Hygge happens here in... Yes, exactly. That's the thing, and I think that's also why the book have become so tremendously popular. That we have just labeled something that people already do, but given them a language to appreciate it in a new way. Yeah.
Can you describe Hygge as an art of living?
Some people do that, and I think especially, people who are embracing the concept for the first time. For us Danes, it's not an art of living, it's just the way we live. So it's a way of living, and we don't see Hygge as a lifestyle because it's just something that is ingrained in our culture, in our everyday life. Yes, yeah, it's a key part of a sort of cultural DNA in that sense. And it's something that's been around in written Danish for 200 years. It's something every Dane have grown up with. Something you hear from very early on, and you sort of appreciate from a young age. So for us, it's a permanent thing. Yeah.
That's interesting. I saw that Denmark is always at the top, and of course the other Nordic countries are there, but Denmark is always at the top. Do you think that Hygge is the reason? This art of living, as I said, and yeah?
It could be. I mean, and you're exactly right. All the Nordic countries are doing well in the happiness rankings. Because we have the same, exactly, welfare system. So equal opportunities for men and women. Also fairly equal opportunities for rich and poor from a global perspective. A good work-life balance, trust in politicians, low levels of corruption, social security, all those things. And that's why all the Nordic countries do well. But the reason why we started to look at Hygge was to try and understand why is it that Denmark just do a little bit better than a lot of the other Nordic countries. And that's why we thought maybe the way we live, maybe the way we pursue sort of happiness on a daily basis with, treats and pleasure and togetherness and relaxation, and putting that at the core of a daily or weekly routine, maybe that has an effect on overall life satisfaction. So that's what the first book was about.
You travel a lot, trying to spread this knowledge you've gathered. I'm very curious, how do people in other cultures and countries react to what you've got to say, what you tell them about Hygge, about happiness? Are there people who really have revelations when they hear you talking and reading you, and they...
Revelations is a strong word, but I'm really happy. I receive letters and mails almost on a daily basis from readers around the world. Some of them say, I've been having Hygge all my life, I just didn't know there was a word for it. And that's a wonderful experience. People react to it in very positive ways. I think it's wonderful to see how alike we are, whether we grew up in Romania or whether we grew up in Denmark or the US or China. And we're first and foremost humans. And we can see really clear patterns when it comes to happiness, of what drives happiness. And also in my experience, when I sit down and talk with people about how we try to study and measure happiness, a lot of people are on board in that approach, and that's a wonderful thing.
And now I want to talk about your second book, right? First of all, tell me, how do you pronounce this word? Because this one, of course,
How would you pronounce it? Yes, exactly. It's pretty well done. Lykke is the Danish word for happiness. And what I wanted to do with the new book was to go beyond Denmark and take readers on a sort of global treasure hunt for happiness and look at pockets of happiness around the world and see what are people, companies, schools, foundations doing right in terms of creating good conditions for good lives. And what can we take inspiration from the French, the way they structure their meal times, to the Bhutanese that practice a sort of a mindfulness exercise at the beginning of the school day, to the Japanese that practice something they call forest bathing, and just see what spectrum of good ideas can we find around the world that we can sort of take inspiration from. So it's not a to-do list, it's more a menu of ideas from extremely happy people around the world that we can incorporate in our own lives.
The creme de la creme of happiness, sort of. That's very interesting. Okay, I want to ask you another thing. How did your perception about happiness change over time? I mean, was it something different before you started involving so much in this research field? Is it different now, your vision, your perception about happiness? What is happiness to you now and what was it before?
I think I probably have a sort of clearer picture of the different dimensions of happiness, where earlier I probably just looked at happiness as one big sort of porridge that was sort of mixed in together, and now I see the different domains or different dimensions more sort of distinctly apart. And of course I'm very much inspired by the research and the sort of philosophical conversations around happiness, and I like the distinction between sort of purpose and pleasure, and I think a lot of us are torn on a daily basis between those two pursuits, and I think, as with everything else, trying to strike a balance between those two is important. But I've probably become better at separating the two and understanding the two, and sort of understanding that I have to take a little bit from each pot and put into my life.
Why do you think that the Southeast European countries are at the bottom of that ranking list with happiness, involving happiness? Why are we so low? Do you think of course there are many reasons, but which are the most important from your perspective as a specialist?
I mean, don't beat yourself too much up, because I mean, Romania is if you take 155 countries, Romania is 57, so you're almost in the top third. So, from a global perspective, you're actually doing relatively well. I know here there is a lot of challenges with the political system in terms of corruption, and we see that trust in our politicians, trust in our political systems matters in terms of quality of life. But I think it's wonderful to hear of the demonstrations that have been recently and will be again soon, in terms of the people coming together and demanding more responsibility and higher levels of ethics from your politicians. I think that's a wonderful thing. I also saw that when I was in South Korea last year, also massive demonstrations against corrupt politicians, and I think that's a tremendously wonderful thing if the people come together and demand better governance than you currently have. And I think that's one of the things that work well in Denmark. And in the Scandinavian countries, we do pay a lot in tax. I pay more than 50% of my income in tax, but I, together with 9 out of 10 Danes, say we're happily paying with our tax because we feel we get a lot of quality of life in return. Good infrastructure, good schools, good healthcare and so on. And that's why it's important that the government works, that the government is efficient and ethical, and helps distribute quality of life back to the people from the taxes that are paid in.
I really want to hear you say it. It's not that I don't think people already want to read your books, but I want to hear you say it. Why should the happy readers, our happy readers, read your book?
I mean, that's completely up to them. And if people are interested in sort of the Danish way of life that focuses on relaxation and pleasure and togetherness and warmth, then I would recommend Hygge. If people are more sort of globally interested in seeing a wide spectrum of what happy people are doing around the world, then I would recommend the second book on Lykke. But feel free to read anything they like.
Well then, I would recommend both. Thank you so much, Mike. It was really a pleasure to having you, and I hope I'll see you some other time, maybe at your third book.
And I've already promised to come back to Bucharest. Yes, thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot.